There is a soil in the Amazon rainforest that has remained fertile for over 2,000 years. It does not need synthetic fertilizer. It does not need to be replanted or rotated. It actually regenerates itself, growing deeper and richer with each passing decade. Scientists have measured it, adding 1 centimeter of new depth every single year, all on its own. This soil contains 70 times more carbon than the depleted earth surrounding it, and it holds onto nutrients so effectively that crops grown in it produce yields that dwarf anything modern agriculture can achieve on normal ground. Ancient civilizations used this soil to feed populations of over 100,000 people in a region where the natural earth is so poor that nothing should grow at all. And yet today, almost no one has heard of it. The global fertilizer industry is worth nearly $300 billion per year, and they would very much like to keep it that way. This is the story of Terra Preta, the Black Earth that could end our dependence on synthetic fertilizer forever, and why the modern world decided to bury it. This is a story that the fertilizer industry does not want you to hear. I spent over 30 years working in agricultural genetics, studying how plants grow, how soils function, and how we might feed a growing world without destroying the planet in the process. And in all that time, I never encountered anything quite like Terra Preta. A soil so fertile, so self-sustaining, so fundamentally different from everything modern agriculture teaches us that it seems almost impossible. But it is not impossible. It is real. It exists in patches across the Amazon basin, covering an area that some researchers estimate to be twice the size of Great Britain. And the most remarkable thing about it is that humans made it, thousands of years ago, using techniques that we could easily replicate today if we chose to. The story begins in the 1950s, when a young Dutch soil scientist named Wim Sombroek traveled to Brazil to study the soils of the Amazon. What he found there changed his life, and eventually changed our understanding of what soil can be. Sombroek discovered patches of incredibly dark, almost black earth scattered throughout the rainforest. The local people called it Terra Preta do Indio, which translates to Black Earth of the Indians. This soil was completely different from the reddish, nutrient-poor earth that surrounded it. While the normal Amazon soil, called terra comum, or common earth, could only support crops for a year or two before becoming exhausted, the Terra Preta remained fertile year after year, decade after decade, century after century. Sombroek was fascinated. He had grown up in the Netherlands, where he knew about a similar type of dark, fertile soil called plagen that Dutch farmers had created over centuries by adding manure and organic matter to sandy ground. When he saw the Terra Preta in Brazil, it reminded him of that life-giving earth from his homeland, and he dedicated the rest of his career to understanding it. He spent years studying this mysterious soil, trying to understand where it came from and why it was so different. At first, scientists proposed various natural explanations. Perhaps it was volcanic ash from the Andes Mountains. Perhaps it was sediment deposited by ancient lakes. But as researchers dug deeper, literally and figuratively, they discovered something extraordinary. The Terra Preta was not natural at all. It was man-made. Ancient Amazonian civilizations had created it deliberately, using a combination of charcoal, organic waste, pottery shards, bones, and other materials that they worked into the poor natural soil over generations. Terra Preta is characterized by several distinctive features that set it apart from normal soil. It contains high concentrations of charcoal, along with pottery fragments, animal and fish bones, plant residues, and other organic matter. It is rich in nutrients, like nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, zinc, and manganese. And it supports an incredibly diverse community of microorganisms that work together to maintain its fertility. But the key ingredient, the secret that makes Terra Preta so special, is charcoal. Not the kind of charcoal you buy for your barbecue, but a specific type of low-temperature charcoal that scientists now call biochar. When organic matter like wood or plant waste is burned slowly at relatively low temperatures with limited oxygen, it transforms into a stable form of carbon that can persist in the soil for thousands of years. This charcoal has a unique structure, full of tiny pores and channels that create an enormous surface area. A single gram of biochar can have a surface area equivalent to a tennis court. These pores become home to beneficial microorganisms, and they trap nutrients that would otherwise wash away in the heavy tropical rains. The ancient Amazonians understood this, even if they did not have the scientific vocabulary to explain it. They practiced what researchers now call slash and char agriculture, as opposed to the slash and burn techniques that destroy soil fertility. Instead of burning their fields completely and watching the nutrients disappear into the atmosphere, they smoldered the vegetation slowly, creating charcoal that they mixed back into the earth. They added their food scraps, their fish bones, their broken pottery, their human and animal waste. Over time, this mixture transformed the worthless jungle soil into something miraculous. In 2023, researchers from MIT and other institutions published a groundbreaking study that confirmed what many had suspected for years. Terra preta was not an accident. It was not a byproduct of daily living that happened to accumulate over time. It was intentionally created by ancient Amazonians as a deliberate strategy to improve their soil and sustain large, complex societies. The researchers worked with the modern Kwikuro people in the upper Xingu River basin, who still practice many of the same techniques their ancestors used. They observed how the Kwikuro create what they call middens, which are essentially compost piles where they deposit food scraps, ash, charcoal, and organic waste. Over time, these middens decompose and transform into dark, fertile earth that the villagers then use to grow their crops. The Kwikuro have a word for this soil. They call it egepe, and they describe specific daily practices for creating and cultivating it. The researchers watched as Kwikuro farmers spread ash on the ground and placed charcoal around the base of trees. These were obviously intentional actions, not random accidents. The scientists then compared the soil in modern Kwikuro villages to the terra preta found in nearby archaeological sites where the ancestors of the Kwikuro lived centuries ago. The chemical signatures matched. The ancient terra preta was created using the same techniques that the Kwikuro still practice today. This was not primitive agriculture. This was sophisticated soil engineering that allowed civilizations to thrive in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. When the Spanish explorer Francisco de Orellana became the first European to travel the length of the Amazon River in the 16th century, he reported something that later historians refused to believe. He described densely populated regions extending for hundreds of kilometers along the riverbanks, with towns and villages so numerous that they seemed to form an almost continuous settlement. Population levels, he claimed, exceeded even those of Europe at the time. For centuries, scholars dismissed these accounts as exaggeration or fantasy. How could such large populations exist in a jungle where the soil was too poor to grow anything? But the discovery of terra preta changed everything. Those ancient civilizations were not farming the natural soil. They were farming soil they had created themselves. Soil that could sustain populations of 100,000 people or more on islands like Marajo at the mouth of the Amazon. This civilization vanished after European contact, destroyed by diseases like smallpox, and by slave raids conducted by Portuguese bandeirantes that decimated the indigenous population. Within a few generations, the great settlements along the Amazon were abandoned. The fields returned to forest, and the knowledge of how to create terra preta was nearly lost, passed down only in fragments among the surviving communities. But the soil itself remained, still fertile after 500 years of abandonment, still producing crops without any added fertilizer, still regenerating itself in ways that modern science is only beginning to understand. Now let me tell you about the science that makes this so remarkable, and why the fertilizer industry has no interest in you knowing about it. Normal soil loses its fertility over time. When you grow crops, they extract nutrients from the earth. Rain washes away what remains. Without constant inputs of fertilizer, the soil becomes exhausted and yields decline. This is the fundamental assumption of modern agriculture, and it is the basis of a global industry worth nearly $300 billion per year. Every year, farmers around the world must purchase synthetic fertilizers to replace what their crops have taken. The companies that manufacture these fertilizers, the banks that finance their purchase, the equipment dealers who sell the spreaders and applicators, all depend on this annual cycle of depletion and replacement. But terra preta breaks this cycle entirely. The charcoal in terra preta does not decompose like normal organic matter. Its molecular structure, composed of stable aromatic carbon rings, resists breakdown by microorganisms. It remains in the soil for centuries, even millennia, continuing to perform its function of holding nutrients and supporting microbial life. Studies have found that terra preta contains up to 9% black carbon, compared to just 0.5% in the surrounding natural soil. The carbon levels are 70 times higher than in normal Amazon earth. And because the charcoal holds onto nutrients so effectively, crops grown in terra preta require little or no additional fertilizer. Even more remarkably, terra preta appears to regenerate itself over time. Podologist William Woods of the University of Kansas was the first to document this phenomenon, which remains one of the central mysteries of soil science. Somehow, the combination of charcoal, microorganisms, and organic matter in terra preta creates a self-sustaining system that actually increases in volume and fertility over time. The soil grows deeper at a rate of approximately 1 centimeter per year. No one fully understands how this happens, but the implications are staggering. Imagine a soil that does not deplete, that does not require annual inputs of expensive chemicals, that actually improves the longer you use it. This is not a fantasy. This is terra preta, and it has been doing exactly this for over 2,000 years. The modern version of this ancient technology is called biochar, and it works on the same principles. You take organic waste, anything from wood chips to agricultural residues to food scraps, and you heat it in a low oxygen environment through a process called pyrolysis. The result is a stable form of carbon that you can add to your soil, where it will remain for centuries, improving fertility, retaining water, and reducing the need for synthetic fertilizers. Studies have shown that biochar can reduce fertilizer requirements by 20 to 50% while maintaining or even increasing crop yields. Research published in scientific journals has demonstrated that biochar improves water retention in sandy soils, helps clay soils drain better, and increases the availability of nutrients to plant roots. It also provides habitat for beneficial soil bacteria and fungi, creating a living ecosystem beneath the surface that supports healthy plant growth. It also sequesters carbon in the soil, helping to combat climate change by keeping carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So why is biochar not everywhere? Why is every farmer in the world not using this ancient technology that could save them money, improve their yields, and help save the planet? The answer, as with so many things, comes down to money and power. The global fertilizer industry generates hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue every year. The major fertilizer companies reported combined profits of over $28 billion in 2021 alone, and those profits increased dramatically in 2022. These companies have no interest in a technology that would reduce or eliminate the need for their products. They have spent decades building a system where farmers are dependent on annual purchases of synthetic fertilizers, and they have no intention of letting that system change. Throughout Europe and the United States, biochar was once commonly used as a soil amendment and as a feed supplement for livestock. Farmers knew that adding charcoal to their fields improved soil health, and that feeding charcoal to their animals improved digestion. This knowledge was passed down through generations. But as industrial agriculture took over in the 20th century, these traditional practices were abandoned in favor of synthetic chemicals that promised higher yields and easier application. The fertilizer companies marketed their products aggressively, and the old ways were forgotten. Today, when researchers and entrepreneurs try to bring biochar back into mainstream agriculture, they face enormous obstacles. The technology is dismissed as primitive or unproven, despite thousands of years of evidence in the Amazon and decades of modern scientific research. Farmers are told that biochar is too expensive, that results are too variable, that it only works if you convert your whole operation to organic. The banks that finance farm operations push for bigger equipment and more chemical inputs. The entire system is designed to maintain dependence on annual purchases, not to promote self-sufficiency. Have you ever heard of terra preta before today? Have you ever wondered why this incredible technology is not taught in agricultural schools or promoted by government extension services? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. The good news is that you do not need permission from the fertilizer industry to use biochar on your own land. You do not need to wait for government approval or corporate blessing. The technology is simple enough that ancient civilizations mastered it without any modern equipment, and you can do the same. You can make it yourself using simple techniques that require nothing more than a metal container and some organic waste. The process is called pyrolysis, and it involves heating organic material in a low oxygen environment until it transforms into stable carbon. You can use wood chips, fallen branches, agricultural residues, even food scraps. The resulting biochar should be charged before use, which means soaking it in a nutrient-rich liquid like compost tea or diluted urine for a few weeks. This fills the pores of the charcoal with nutrients and beneficial microorganisms, preparing it to work its magic in your soil. Apply the charged biochar to your garden at a rate of about 5 to 10% by volume, mixing it thoroughly into the top several inches of soil. You can also add it to your compost pile, where it will absorb nutrients and beneficial microorganisms as the compost matures. Some gardeners dig trenches and fill them with biochar, creating permanent fertility zones that will benefit their plants for generations. Once you add biochar to your garden or field, it becomes a permanent improvement. Unlike compost, which breaks down within a few years, biochar remains stable for centuries. It will continue to hold nutrients, support microbial life, and improve soil structure long after you are gone. Your grandchildren will benefit from the biochar you add today, just as we benefit from the terra preta that ancient Amazonians created 2,000 years ago. The story of terra preta is really a story about what we have lost in the pursuit of industrial efficiency. Our ancestors understood that soil is not just dirt. It is a living system, a community of organisms working together to support plant life. They knew that feeding the soil, rather than just feeding the plant, was the key to sustainable agriculture. They created techniques that worked with nature rather than against it, building fertility over generations rather than depleting it in a single season. Modern agriculture has reversed this wisdom entirely. We treat soil as an inert medium, a simple container for holding plants upright while we pump them full of synthetic nutrients. We have depleted the carbon content of agricultural soils by an average of 50% worldwide. We have killed the microbial communities that once made soil fertile, and we have made ourselves dependent on an industry that profits from our dependence, that sells us the same products year after year because we have forgotten how to build soil that sustains itself. But the knowledge is not truly lost. It survives in the terra preta of the Amazon, in the practices of indigenous communities like the Kwikuro, in the research of scientists who have dedicated their careers to understanding this remarkable soil. It survives in the simple act of making charcoal and adding it to your garden, of composting your food scraps instead of throwing them away, of building soil rather than depleting it. The fertilizer industry would prefer that you never learn about terra preta. They would prefer that you continue buying their products year after year, believing that there is no alternative. But there is an alternative. It has existed for thousands of years, hidden in plain sight in the forests of the Amazon. A soil that replaces all fertilizer forever. A technology so simple that ancient civilizations mastered it without any modern equipment. A solution to some of our most pressing agricultural and environmental problems, buried not by nature, but by an industry that profits from keeping it forgotten. The choice is yours. You can continue to depend on a system designed to keep you dependent. Or you can start building soil that will sustain your family for generations, just as the ancient Amazonians built soil that still sustains life today, 2,000 years after they created it. If you found value in this, consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who needs to hear this story. There is so much more to uncover.